Hello everyone and welcome. Exhibition and display design is probably one of the most important aspects of installation and storytelling within an exhibition setting. I would even say that the design alone can sometimes make or break your interpretation. So there is a reason why interpretation people so often work very closely with designers on exhibition projects, and it can be all kinds of designers, graphic designers, software designers, 3D, 4D designers, digital designers, and so on. This work has to be really spot on and created in a way that conveys your messages and your storytelling in the best possible way. So I thought let's have a look at some examples again in this video, and also try and go through what actually is it that design within an exhibition and display setting can do. How much can it actually influence of your work? As always, remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and add your comments below. So what actually is it exhibition and display design can do? First of all, it can completely determine your atmosphere and the mood in the exhibition. Whether you want it to be sort of homely, cozy, or a specific style, if you want to have a focus on science, learning, participation, if you want it to be family friendly, if you want to create participation or action, or whatever it might be, the design can really help you convey this. Now I have a little example here that I hope will illustrate this point. It's from an exhibition, a special exhibition at Hampton Court Palace in London back in 2016. It's from a special exhibition called The Empress and the Gardener. And it was focusing on the palace gardens and parks, and it featured a series of watercolors, so drawings, lended from the State Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg in Russia actually, but all the drawings were off Hampton Court. They were created by one of the palace's draftsmen, or surveyors as we would say nowadays, and featured all sorts of perspectives of the palace, the gardens and the parks around the palace. So it was kind of a view around 250 years back in time really, to what the palace, the gardens and the parks looked like back then. So fantastic from a historic and a research perspective. But watercolors in themselves are kind of static really. There's not a lot of movement there's not a lot of sort of bigger objects going on. So one of the things that could help you get a little movement or some greater perspective into an exhibition like this was the help of a map. As you can see on the floor there, there was a huge floor map created of Hampton Court Palace, of the gardens and the parks around the palace. There were massive grounds, and with little dots where all of these watercolors had been drawn back in the day. And of course, if you were local, if you knew the grounds very well, this was really fascinating, because it was very easy to say, oh yeah, that particular drawing was made there, and aha, he stood there when he did that one. And also actually for people who didn't really know the palace grounds very well, I think a lot of people are kind of drawn visually to maps. So that was one example of actually getting a little movement into what was otherwise an exhibition of quite static objects. Another way of using design in an exhibition setting is activating the different senses. It's not just the visual element here. That's all very often how we think about exhibitions, as being visual, but that's not at all the case. Now here is a brilliant example from the Wellcome collection. They had a special exhibition called Tranquility back in 2021 that looked at different experiences around calmness, around calm feelings, how we reconnect with ourselves, and the complexities around these issues, how we bring peace and balance into our lives. And one of their installations was an installation by Crystal Lepez, a multisensory installation about forests. and it was wonderfully done. Now this video is a little bit dark, but I hope you can see anyway what's going on. You could smell the forest ground, you can hear the sounds of it, and it had these huge screens with wonderful photos of trees and forests. So let's just have a look at this one. It was a little bit dark there in the video, but I hope you got an impression of this. Actually, visitors spent quite a long time just sitting there and enjoying the piece. So that's very much one way of activating senses. Another way of using design is to create an illusion of movement or dynamics in the stillness. As we saw there in the example with the watercolors, very often exhibitions are static in their own right, because there isn't a lot of movement going on. Here are a couple of examples as well. One from the Pacific Gallery at the National Maritime Museum of a Pacific canoe, or a drua as they're called. And as you can see there, it's on a little bit of a plinth, this blue plinth indicating a wave, as if the canoe was on water. And you can even see the bottom there is a little bit hidden by the plinth, as if to indicate that it's in the water. And that's a way of creating some movement. Also, another example is this exhibition from the Science Museum in London about mathematics. It was called How Has Mathematics Shaped Our World? And as you can see in the photo to the right there was a huge plane just above you. You walked under it. And to create this illusion of lots of wind behind the plane and lots of movement and air going on, you could see it in the architecture and the design there, in this sort of wavy structure. Also in the ground, on the floor there, you have these lines indicating movement. And what was really strange for me, I found, when I was walking around this gallery, was that you kind of followed the lines automatically without even thinking about it. There wasn't a specific chronology or order in which you had to see the different things or sort of themes in this exhibition. So you could walk around as you liked, but you kind of tended to follow these lines and movements quite a lot, to my surprise. And it just goes to show just how much of an impact this kind of illusion of movements or illustration of dynamics can do in the stillness of an exhibition. Now, of course, design has a massive impact as well on colors, and colors is a really good way of categorizing or creating themes or a historical chronology in exhibitions as well. An example here is from the British Museum, their Nero exhibition in 2021 called The Man Behind the Myth. And they had different colored labels. And at the beginning of the exhibition, you were told that if you are specifically looking for learning aspects or questions around reflection, then have a look at these very purple, bright colored labels, where the museum had put some questions for you to reflect upon or to help you learn. And that's another way of using design and the colors in a really brilliant way to highlight a specific aspect that you want to get through. Also, of course, the actual object presentation and their stories. What do the objects tell? Now, the same object, as we know, can tell very different stories in different settings. And this is really a point where graphic design comes into the picture. I did a video on graphic design not so long ago. I will link to it in the video below, so do have a look at it if you're interested in the different elements of graphic design. That's really something that can be useful in object presentation as well. It can also be interesting to actually use design to explain and create an understanding around your fragile objects. So on the conservation and preservation aspects, Like we saw in the example there with the watercolor drawings, these are very light sensitive objects, and you can only really see this exhibition in a very low lux level. Also, if you have sensitive or fragile objects like textiles, for example, it can be wood, use the design to help you tell that story and explain why, for example, you have to view this particular drawing at a very low lux level. Instead of saying we're really sorry that we can't put more spotlight on this, explain why, because this is something that can really create an understanding in visitors on the concepts of preservation and conservation. Now, it can also be really fun to play around with surprises or unexpected visual approaches in the design. And I have an example here that's a little bit old. It's from a project called the Grand Tour in York from 2008, where a lot of copies of paintings were put up on the streets around York, the city of York. They really created lots of surprise in people walking around York, because obviously you were not expecting to see a painting outside in the rain and everything. And some of the paintings were quite famous, so you'd recognize them right away, and you would go, oh, surely that cannot be true. But they were all of them copies and set up in new environments. So you have photos there from down from the riverside. You have some paintings set up on old walls and buildings in the park in York. A really funny one was this photo to the left of the painting of a grotesque old woman that was put up right outside a beauty salon. I find that really funny. But it was a way of engaging with paintings in a completely new setting. Usually we will see these paintings in a very strict sort of museum gallery setting with lots of alarms and security and stuff like that. But seeing them outside really created a very, very different way of interacting with them. Also, of course, design is brilliant when it comes to creating different layers within an exhibition or within the interpretation. You can use it to activate senses, as we saw. You can put more info in there. You can make the exhibition continue online, use QR codes. You can use call to actions, interactives, activities, learning elements, touchscreens, and so on as part of your exhibition design. So there is so much you can do around exhibition and display design, and it's such a brilliant way of using your creativity around storytelling, using that of external partners very often as well, designers, software developers, 2D, 3D, 4D designers and so on, and let them play around with what is actually doable within your historical settings, and how you can highlight the elements that you really want to highlight. And it's often, I find, also a way of creating some great surprises for interaction with visitors as well. Do you have some really good examples of this, of how to use design in exhibition and gallery settings? It would be so lovely to hear about your experiences here as well, so please do share.